Anyway, let's continue with our, well, not our discussion, that part, but truly, I mean, it was very enriching, I thought, this morning, just hearing everyone experience. We can just learn so much from each other. And this is, the whole Buddhist study is based on that principle. How? Because we debate. So we have an hour every day, an hour and a half of class every day, and we spend 4 hours to debate. So we spend more time with our classmates debating than we spend in the classroom. Why? Because the teacher is just one person, one idea that is presented. But then every student has their own ideas. So it's very enriching getting everyone's idea presented. So that's very enriching. And also speaking yourself about something, you learn while speaking. I thought at some point maybe we start a program where everyone has to teach for 5 minutes. Right? Just teaching is I mean, while you're speaking, you say things that you go, huh? I just said that? Oh, that makes sense. It comes automatically. This is something special about teachings where you have new ideas while you talk. That before you sat down, you didn't know would come out of your mouth. Anyway, so just discussing things, expressing them can be helpful for yourself, but also, of course, sharing them with others. So that was very special today. In the first class, we had this discussion. But let's go back to the material. So now I guess subjective and objective meditation is clear. The idea of you take an object and meditate it by taking it as an object, or the mind itself becomes that which you meditate on, in the case of compassion. Okay. All right. And then when to meditate, this speaks about when to meditate. Well, the best time is in the morning, when your mind is clear, depending on how long it takes you to wake up. So it's like sitting down in your cushion, you're still like, no, you probably want to have a cup of coffee first, or make sure you wake up sufficiently. But the morning is said to be a good time to meditate. So make some time in the morning. And of course, what is so important, to set the motivation. To sit down in the morning and think, this day I'm going to make it meaningful. I'm going to try my very best to weaken my afflictions, to watch my own mind, to be of greatest benefit to myself and others. So in that way, it influences your entire day. Somehow it may actually keep you from doing things you would otherwise do without setting the motivation. So that's seen as very, very important. Okay, and then His Holiness goes into the actual text. He speaks briefly about how to listen. Now, more details on everything I've said so far you find, of course, in this book itself. And if you want to get a more technical version of that, well, the best book to read would be the Lamrim Chemo, or the Lama Tsongkhapa's Graduated Stages to the Path of Enlightenment. No, it's called different. The Treatise of the Graduated Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, something like that. And it's available, actually, the 3 volumes. You can now get these 3 volumes online for free. Yeah, you can buy the book, which is more expensive, but this is the extensive version of
the name?
Lamrim Chemo. Wait, let me just find it. I have it here. I have a whole library in here, which is so wonderful. Okay, Lama Tsongkhapa, the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment. Here I have volume 1. The treatise, yeah, so the Great Treatise. The Great Treatise, Lamrim Chemo, but in English it's called the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment. Anyway, I got this for free. It's available now. Yes, exactly, by Lama Tsongkhapa. It's 3 volumes. So here you have a very extensive version of this text we're studying here. But anyway, maybe you start with this, and then you take it from there if you're interested. His Holiness does talk about how to listen to a teaching. I've already said it to some degree, like being unbiased, being skeptical. Do you know the analogy of a vessel?
Yes.
Yeah, so you get it together? You're not supposed to be like a vessel that is
Empty.
upside down. You're not supposed to be like turned upside down. Right? So actually the idea of the vessel, you're right, it should be empty, but then usually they describe it from the point of view of what you shouldn't do. So the vessel should not be upside down, which means like not being attentive to to think about something else in the meantime, so you miss things. So in the same way as you can't pour something into a vessel when it's upside down, one should open the mind and be open-minded, if you like. Be open and attentive. The other thing, one should not be like a leaky vessel, as in like, retaining some things and not retaining the rest, kind of like in here, out there kind of idea. So leaky vessel is not a good idea. And one should not be biased. So like a dirty vessel. If you want to pour milk into an oily vessel, then the milk will be, may get spoiled or may not have the right kind of taste that you expect. So like a clean vessel that is not leaky and is able to receive. Which reminds me of something. In Buddhism, you have weird things. There are weird things in Buddhism. For example, prostrating. I know it's not popular in Israel, bowing down, prostrating, right? But I think it needs to be explained why, because it's not some kind of empty ritual. It's a bit like, prostration is actually not a physical thing. It's actually mental. So we're trying to be like a vessel. Like this idea of a vessel, this is how I just remembered it. When we learn something new, we're like a vessel. So a vessel that is, turned in the right, not upside down, but with the open part up there, not leaky and not spoiled. But there's one more thing. When you have a vessel and you want to pour something in it, from the physical point of view, and very much the physical ideas govern the ideas that we follow. Which one is higher, the vessel or the water bottle or the milk bottle? Which one is higher?
The milk.
So you have to put that which pours is higher than that which... So because of that fact, there's a sense if you pay respect towards someone, you lower yourself. Not because there's something about being lower, there's nothing about... But there's this idea, because of the physical, because of gravity, I guess, it influences us to such a degree that we associate humility with like lowering, like being, or humility in the sense of receiving something. So therefore, this idea of prostrating, like you bow down before, like usually when I give a teaching, for example, I would bow down to my seat, imagining the Buddha sits here, or visualizing my teacher sits here. So, not because I have any quality, I don't have any quality, it's my teacher who taught me all this. So it's the sense of humility, that instead of feeling full of myself, I prostrate towards my teacher to remember, it's his kindness that is responsible for me being able to speak here. Or you prostrate towards, like for example, if you're teaching with the Dalai Lama, you prostrate towards him. It's not like saying, wow, he's this great human being, I worship you. It's more like, I'm opening myself. It's not for him, it's for myself to think, okay, actually the thought is more important. The physical is just, if you don't have the thought, it's just exercising. Right? If you do this kind of physical prostration, if you don't have the thought, that just becomes... an exercise, but the physical movement enables you to do this mentally. So it's a bit like I'm ready to listen. I'm opening myself up. That's all it is. It's not for the Dalai Lama, for example. It's really just to open yourself up and to prepare yourself for the teachings. So understanding that, it's good to understand it. It's not important to do it. It's just to understand it, because otherwise it's like, what is going on? What are people doing? Yeah. So this kind of like, I'm like a vessel. I'm open. I lower myself towards, in the case of like a lama, you would lower. So just this attitude, that's a prostration in a way, that's a bowing down. It just enables you to receive more. So some of these ideas in Buddhism, they need to be explained. They're psychological techniques. They're really like techniques. As I said, the prostrating, the bowing down is actually mental. Where you go, okay, I'm opening myself, I'm happy to receive now. That's what you really think. So to bow down means I'm happy to receive now. I'm open. I'm ready. Okay. Start talking, kind of idea. So this needs to be explained. Some of those weird rituals, right? Trying to think other things that are maybe weird. So prostration is one part. Then the other things that we think, oh my God, what is all this? It's so much ritual. When you see people bow down before the Dalai Lama, again, it's kind of like, you know, it's more like from inside, like, you know, I'm opening, I'm ready, I want to be inspired. So it's really not for the Dalai Lama, it's for ourselves, it's for oneself. Okay. So anyway, just some of those rituals that seem like rituals from the outside, but anything in Buddhism actually always has a meaning behind it. It can become a ritual, of course. Sometimes it's just, for some people, they just go through the motion and then it's just exercising, which is also okay. Exercise is good. But if you understand the meaning, it's really just all mental. Most important is the mental, and the rest you just do in order to remind yourself. Okay? All right. Anyway, then the actual first chapter now of this text, so this was a preparatory kind of explanation that is always in every Lamrim text, or in every text that deals with the graduated stages to enlightenment, there's always an explanatory introduction. And then the actual topic, the first topic, is knowing the qualifications of a teacher. Now, when we talk about a teacher, we need to be aware that it's not like me. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a teacher in this sense. We're just like a group and we just discuss things. I share with you what I've learned. But I'm not a teacher in this sense here. Here we talk about a spiritual teacher, someone who has realizations. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or Jadu Rinpoche, or Yengatsula, they are regarded to be teachers. Like we call them also lamas. There's a word that's very heavy. It actually means heavy, which is interesting. It means heavy, but it has a heavy negative connotation. The word guru, right? It means heavy with good qualities. So that's the translation of the word. But it's been abused. But really, it just means someone who is living what they have, what they talk, what they teach. So someone who actually lives what they teach. So when they talk about love, they're actually loving. They're very loving, very compassionate. So I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama is a good example. So it's recommended to rely on someone like him. What does that mean? Rely on someone? It seems spooky. Well, here it's very important to understand this correctly. It doesn't mean we follow him blindly. Well, you don't do that. That would be very unhealthy. To always investigate and always check what His Holiness says, to be always critical, and His Holiness, if you receive teachings, he will always emphasize that. But to always also generate some feeling of closeness, like being inspired. I guess it's another word. Being inspired by him, being inspired to be like that. So, and there's a feeling of closeness you generate, which is not physical. You don't have to be around a Lama. You don't have to be in his presence. It's a mental closeness. You make a mental connection by kind of thinking of their qualities, rejoicing, being happy about, like when you see them. Remember I talked about 3 types of faith? So there's faith of belief. So believing, for example, that things are impermanent. Or believing that there's consciousness, right? Until we actually know that there is. Until then, we believe it. Or believing that anger is harmful. That's a faith of belief. I mean, we have a lot of faith. We believe the world is round. I mean, some of you may have realized, may know incontrovertibly that our globe is round. But if you've taken a rocket ship and you've seen it firsthand, then you know. Or you've done the reasonings, the mathematical kind of, I don't know what you need to really calculate here to know that the earth is round. I've never done this. I couldn't be bothered. I just believe it. And actually, everything I learned in school, most of it, I believe it. Right? I believe that there are cells. I believe that my body has that many bones and that many cells. I've never counted them. I've never done the reasoning to establish that. So most of what I say I know, I actually believe it. I believe I was born on a specific day. I don't know, I don't remember, and I believe it. My parents told me, so I believe it. So I have a lot of stuff I read online. I don't know it, I believe it. Okay? So most of the things, we can say that. So that's faith in that kind of, that's how the word is used in Tibet, in English or in Tibetan. The word faith here means belief. That's one type. So we have a lot of faith in scientists. I sometimes say, jokingly, but it's true. I think the new religion now is science. some scientist says so, we believe it. Okay? 3 scientists say so, well, we really believe it. 5 do, and they're all from Harvard, absolutely believe it, right? And then they change, right? And they change 3 years later. Sorry, I made a mistake. This is a small note. And then a whole new idea comes up. But never mind, we're flexible. We've learned to be flexible. So that's the new kind of religion. And the kind of faith we have, no, I'm kidding, religion not in that sense, but it's like, as previously when it came to, I know in Christianity, you know, my mom used to tell me, like, when she grew up, the priest said so. Must be right. And then everyone in the village went, well, the priest said so, so it must be right. So she remembers that time. My grandmother even stronger, you know, they were like, almost like gods, you know, the pastors or the priests in the village. Anyway.
They said on TV.
Pardon?
They said on TV, it's a fact, because it was said on TV.
Yeah, right. Nowadays it's like, yes, it's true because it was said on TV, exactly. A person in the news said so. But also, like in Judaism, I guess it's similar. You know, the rabbi said so, so therefore it's true. So similar idea. Now nowadays that doesn't happen as easily. It's a scientist that tells us something. That's what I meant. Well, that's faith of belief. But I'm talking about a different type here with regard to the faith one has in the Lama, for example. Here, a spiritual teacher. It's joy. It's when you meet the person, you have a deep feeling of joy. So that kind of faith is seen as important. I guess it's kind of like a devotion. So these words mean something else to us, but in the Buddhist context, they actually mean joy. You meet someone who's really special, who has qualities that they don't just talk about, they live those qualities, and that brings up some joy. Does that make sense? You're joyful to see someone who's really good, and you find those, I mean, some of the rabbis, I'm sure they're amazing beings who really live what they preach, and they inspire, and you're around them and you feel joy. That's the second type of faith. So that type of faith, this kind of joy, is also the type of joy that one should feel here when thinking of one's Lama, because that makes one want to be like them. And you see it, it's possible. You see that it's possible. That's so beautiful. Because like if I talk about love, compassion, it's just like la da da da. But if someone really lives it, you go, oh my God, it's possible. They can be so loving, so compassionate. I will be like that. I want to be like that. What do I need to do? And then you generate the third type of faith, which is aspiring to become like that. And you work towards it. So therefore, there's something very beautiful about relying on a spiritual teacher, which again, it doesn't mean you do exactly what they tell you. You don't need to. I mean, you ask them for advice. You can commit yourself to totally do what they tell you, but for that you need to really check the person well. You really need to check really, really well. Because if you have only a slight doubt in your mind and may be wrong, don't do it. Okay? So you may reach a level where you get to know a spiritual teacher like the Dalai Lama to such a degree that whatever they say, you're ready to do. But that's very difficult. And you don't need to. You start where you are. You do what you do. It's not like it has to be done. But you can take their advice and try to do what they've said, what they teach. And the best way to please the Lama is to practice what they teach. So if they teach to be generous and you're generous, well, that's the most effective way to please someone like a Lama. So you can please the Lama by practicing, that's all. It's not like making them offerings and so forth. The only reason they would be pleased, a Lama would be pleased if you make an offering, is because you practice generosity. Like if you watch the Lamas, if you make an offering to them, they always give it away anyway. So like Lama Zopa Rinpoche is famous for receiving one gift. You see someone go into Lama Zopa Rinpoche's room, and the people one after the other going into his room, and someone brings in a gift, you see the gift, and then they come out with another gift, and then the next person comes in and comes out with that gift. Because Rinpoche is, of course, he gives everything away, he never keeps anything. So therefore the idea is that if you make a gift to the Lama, it's for your own benefit. The Lama doesn't need it, but wants you to practice generosity. So that kind of relationship is important. If you want someone, so if you rely on someone as a teacher, however scary it means, it doesn't mean you do what they want, it doesn't mean you wash their feet, it doesn't mean you... It's all to be inspired, and whatever you do for your own benefit, really. Right? And in the end, it benefits you. Does that make sense? So it sounds really scary, and of course, the only scary part is if the Lama you rely on is not a Lama. Then you're in trouble. Because if that's not a person who deserves to be called a Lama, whoa. That's where the negative connotation of the guru comes from, because of course in the past there have been, in many societies, Honda speaks about it here in Tibetan societies, that some Tibetans are not qualified to teach, and still they pretend they are, and there's been lots of scandals. So it's our responsibility to check well, to receive many teachings, to watch them, to see whether they actually live what they teach, and to be always skeptical. It says that you can check for 12 years. If it takes you 12 years, it's all right. If it takes you 12 years to check, that's fine. Yeah, however long it takes. Okay. So I didn't want to leave this out, because sometimes this chapter is left out, because Westerners find this difficult. But no, it is. I don't think it needs to be left out. It just needs to be explained what it actually means. Yeah? And what kind of Lama should you rely on? Well, at least this person should have more qualities than yourself. But the best would be someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, someone like Jadu Rinpoche, some, like these great lamas who we still have around us. So there are quite a few, and some of them come to Israel. Jadu Rinpoche, I believe, is coming in January. If everything works out, then he will come here. So he's definitely a qualified teacher. And again, it's good to just receive teachings and then see whether you feel a closeness. And the closeness, it's not about becoming a groupie. Because there are quite a few Westerners who turn into groupies. You don't need to be physically, that's just a kind of grasping. It's a mental connection. Because these lamas, when they're highly realized beings, they know what you think. I mean, they say the most bizarre things, like they tell you exactly in the moment when you need to hear it, and it's kind of almost spooky. So they mentally connect to you anyway. I mean, their awareness has grown to such a degree, they're perceptive of even our thoughts, etc. Sounds spooky, but anyway, never mind that part if you find that too spooky. But it's still important to connect to them mentally and be inspired. That's it. There's nothing scary. All right. So that's just one part I wanted to share with you here. So here it says, there's Tibetans in various parts of the world who are attempting to teach but are not qualified to do so. Students need to take care in order to avoid such teachers. So that's important, to not follow the wrong kind of person. So to always check, is the behavior of the teacher in accordance with the teachings? So it's always good to check. Okay. Anyway, you can read this here. It says the Sanskrit word for Lama is Guru, which literally means heavy. Heavy in the sense of being possessed of many great qualities, leading to altruistic activities. All right. Teachings cannot be undertaken with an aim to obtain goods, services, or fame. If there's a Lama who does that, he's not a Lama. She's not a Lama. Okay. So again, important to check the person. All right. Okay. So there's quite a few of explanation. If you yourself teach what you should do, it's also an explanation in that, because there's so many different levels of teacher. So if you have some understanding of the Dharma and you are asked to teach, I think it's good to agree and to the best of your ability to share what you have to share. Of course, make sure that you have the right kind of motivation to benefit others. And with that motivation, I don't think there's anything wrong. And you learn so much. You yourself learn so much by teaching, by, as I said, you sometimes hear yourself talk and suddenly you have an idea you never knew you had, actually. You just catch you saying it. So that's a very effective way. And if you don't want to do that, maybe to have participate in a study group where you have the possibility to speak, to share. This is something very valuable to join one of the study groups. So I hear there's a lot going on here in Israel, which is relatively a lot in comparison to other countries where there's much greater population. I mean, in the sense of population, the being such a small country with a relatively small population, there's a lot going on. But it's very effective to have these groups. All right. Okay, so that's the part of the relying on a teacher. I think I've said enough about that. Then Buddhism in India and Tibet, that's kind of extra. That topic is extra. So it's just how Buddhism came to be, how the different traditions came into existence. That is easy to understand and doesn't need to be explained. I don't think I need to go into this. It just gives like an overview of this entire book in a sense. And as I said, it doesn't need to be done. Maybe so one part needs to be explained here. So one part is really important. Well, first of all, this teaching here is part of a teaching of a genre of teachings which are called Lamrim, or graduated stages of the path to enlightenment. Now this is seen as a very important genre, and our teachers always say any kind of teaching you get, you need to, any kind of anything you learned when you learned philosophy, you should be able to subsume it under one of the topics of the Lamrim. There's nothing you learn about Buddhism that is not in one way or another part of the Lamrim. So the Lamrim is complete as it is, and everything you learn is somehow part of this. It pertains to the Lamrim. So that's good to remember. So really, if you want to know about Buddhism, if you know the Lamrim, you have the framework, and the rest is just about filling in the details. So this genre of Lamrim, it's just a genre of texts, basically. So you have the Lamrim Chemo, the Great Lamrim by Lama Tsongkhapa. Then there are shorter versions, the Middling Lamrim by Lama Tsongkhapa. They're all available in English. In Hebrew? Do you have the Lamrim Chemo in Hebrew? No. Okay, well, but here everyone speaks enough English to be able to read it in English, I believe. Okay, so how did this Lamrim come into existence? Who started this tradition of Lamrim? It was someone called Atisha. Atisha was a great Indian master who came from India to Tibet, and he wanted to give the teachings to the Tibetan that was most appropriate to the Tibetans. And he decided those were the Lamrim teachings. He introduced those stages. They didn't exist in that form in India. It was not necessary to talk of the teachings in that order or in that specific way, because in India people understood it without this. But this was very effective for the Tibetans at the time when Atisha came to Tibet, and even for Westerners, it's very effective. It's a very beautiful style of presenting Buddhism. So this is also what it says here, and it was based on the idea which existed in India. Here the text talks a little bit about the main monastic university in India, being Nalanda, explaining that in the Tibetan tradition, most of the masters they follow come from Nalanda. And if they don't come from Nalanda, which was the main kind of monastery in India, then they come from what is the name? Can you say again? Vikramalashila. Vikramalashila was the monastery. It's like a derivative, or it's like a branch, basically, if you like, it derived from Nalanda. It arose from Nalanda. And so this was the university, the monastic university that Atisha belonged to. But anyway, they were also part of the Nalanda University. So sometimes His Holiness refers to Tibetan Buddhism as Buddhism according to the Nalanda tradition. Nalanda being that specific Indian monastery. Not to be confused with Nalanda in France. That's not the one we're talking about here. Of course, we're talking about Nalanda Monastic University in India. Now, Atisha, well, at least the monastery he came from was part of Nalanda, if you like. So the point is here that in the Nalanda tradition, a person was categorized into three according to their aspirations, because Buddhist philosophy is not just there for the sense of understanding reality and then leaving it at that. Oh, nice, now I understand how things are, I'll go home now and end of story. No, when you talk about Buddhist practice follows a goal. There's a goal behind. There's a destination. So there are three types of destination. And according to the destination, the goal one holds, they speak about a person of three capacities. A person of smaller capacity, middling capacity, and greater capacity. And that's just the kind of the goal one follows, the kind of aim one has. And according to these three types of aims a person has, the Lamrim has been set forth. So the first capacity is a person who is not just concerned with the happiness of this lifetime, but also of the happiness of future lifetimes. There we have past and future lives. So very difficult to explain the Lamrim without past and future lives, to tell you the truth. I know people like to practice Buddhism without thinking of past and future lives. That's possible. But I have a slightly different take. You can do that, absolutely. But my take on it is the following. Okay? Sorry for those who've heard me say this so many times. There's a 50% chance there is life after this life. 50% chance there is, 50% chance there isn't. Right? Either there are, I don't know, either way. Either there are or there aren't. Whether it's 50% or not, actually I don't care. Some people would argue and say, no, it's not 50, it's something, whatever percentage, but there is a chance there is. You cannot prove to me that there is no future life, and I cannot prove to you that there is. Okay? Right. Alright, we can all agree on that. So, there is a possibility there is. Now, my take is, it is better to live your life as if there were future lives. Because it's a win-win situation. So, even if there are, so let's say, we don't know whether there is, but let's pretend there are. Let's live our life as if there were future lives. Past, who cares? Buddhists are not, past life regression and all that. I mean, it may be helpful if it enables one to gain strong conviction that there's future life. For that reason it would be beneficial, but whether you were an Egyptian priestess or a fly on a cake one day, who cares? Past is past. The future counts. What lies ahead, that is important. Okay. Now, there are a lot of reasons for why saying there must be previous life and there must be future lives. One of the main reasons is that there are physical objects, the physical world around us, and then there's the conscious world. So there's a conscious, there's the immaterial, non-physical experiencer, and then there's the physical world. All right. When did the physical world start? When did the physical world come into existence?
Conception?
No, not your physical world. The physical world in general, this universe. When did it come into existence? When was the first moment of this universe? The Big Bang. Okay. Was that the beginning of physical objects? No. Previous to the Big Bang, you must have had physicality. You have a Hebrew word for physicality, right? Is there a Hebrew word for physicality?
Physical.
Yeah, that word. What is it?
It's material. I think it's easier to use the word physical.
Physical, okay.
But Homer is matter.
It's matter. I don't even want to use the word matter because energy, I don't know, is energy matter? I don't think so. Light is not matter, no. Right? So matter and light are different, but light is part of physicality, something physical. So anything physical, so light, energy, matter, all that is part of what's called physicality. So before the Big Bang, you must have had at least energy, light, I'm sure, light, energy, maybe even matter.
This is not scientific. It's not right.
No, scientific. Before the Big Bang, you didn't have anything.
I'll give you a book. There's a book, Something from Nothing. I'll show you some other time. Where they say it can actually come out of nothing. So
yeah.
Why are you assuming there had to be something before the Big Bang? There's no scientific evidence to support that.
Well, I would say logic would support that because...
Logic.
Yeah, there's no scientific evidence. There was the Big Bang.
No, but I can give you the logical argument which shows that it could have come from nothing. So then we have...
You can give me the logical argument that...
I mean, it's a book that I didn't know. It's Stephen Hawking, you know.
So he's
I'm not a big scientist either, I'm not saying, but it's not necessarily true that there had to be something before the Big Bang.
Oh, so you can have something out of nothing?
read his book. I wouldn't understand it. Maybe you will.
I probably wouldn't understand either. So Stephen Hawking claims that it's possible, but I think it's probably difficult. I'd love to discuss this with him. That'd be really interesting. But actually, logically, you must have something physical in order to have, again, something physical. I mean, Buddhists don't even say that it's possible for a mind to give rise to something physical. But the idea is basically that something physical gives rise to something physical and something physical must always be preceded by something physical. Now the same is true for experience, consciousness. Consciousness must be preceded by a previous moment of consciousness, by a previous moment. So to say that our the first moment of consciousness in this lifetime was the first moment, very difficult. It must have been preceded by some experiencing entity before that. Now the question is, what experiencing entity? From our parents? I mean, that'd be weird. My consciousness is a merging of my parents' mind. Like, some part I left out, and I'm not exactly like my parents' mind. And anyway, how did my parents' mind merge together? I know how the semen eggs thing happened. But the consciousness? And that my consciousness was created by my body? Well, how can something unconscious give rise to something conscious? This is also what modern physicists say. How can something as immaterial as consciousness give rise to something as conscious as awareness? So it wouldn't make sense, as the brain, sorry. How can something as immaterial as brain give rise, or body, give rise to something? So from a Buddhist point of view, they have their own main causes that give rise to their existence. That's one logical reasoning for why there must have been consciousness even before this life. I'm just reciting the reasonings, never mind. I'm just giving you just some of the Buddhist reasons, and you can reflect on them at your own time. Furthermore, the idea that, therefore, that consciousness must have been preceded by consciousness, and that also it cannot go out of existence. Something physical cannot go out of existence. So I don't know what Stephen Hawking would say to that, but I don't think you can have a physical thing and it just goes into nothing. It totally disappears, without any energy or something left. I don't think that would be possible. I mean, we could debate that, I don't know, but it's there. One moment you have something, the next moment, nothing. I don't think that would be possible. Anyway, we can debate it. So, but consciousness is said to be similar. Consciousness gives rise to a next moment of consciousness, etc. So there's already the sense of a continuum, that even before this life, we must have been conscious. Also, so many children, and I don't know whether this is so many children, but quite a few children do claim they remember past lives. Now, these are case studies. You need to look at those stories. But when you start reading them, they're quite amazing. I mean, in India, this is a phenomenon you find again and again. And usually, oftentimes, the parents investigate. Their children tell them, I was born in such and such village, and my parents' name are this, and I want to go home, and da-da-da-da-da. And, you know, the parents don't even know the village exists. No one around them. They're illiterate often. They come from a place, they maybe know the next town, but they've never gone to school to learn about other places in India. And their child gives them the name of a family, a name of a village, and they say, this is my parents, I want to go home. There's stories again and again, and sometimes they make it to the newspaper when they think it's interesting enough. I remember one story of a boy who said, you know, he wants to go home, his father is a tailor, his mom is that, you're not my parents, I want to go home. And he was terribly afraid of tractors. And as he grew older, you know, he was able to speak clearly, and he kept talking about going home. And one day their parents decided, okay, the poor guy, let's investigate. So they asked around, and sure enough, I don't know, maybe 1,000 kilometers away, there was this village called da-da-da. So they found there was such a place, so they took the boy there. And the moment they arrived in this village, he was like, oh yeah, I live there. He took his parents to a little store. And it was shuttered, it was closed. And he said, my father works in there. And so they asked someone and said, no, there's no one there. So then they were like, that was all wrong. And then they investigated a little further, and they said, well, there used to be a man in there. He was a tailor. But then his little boy was killed by a tractor, and it made him so unhappy, he gave up his business. And they were like, oops, tractor? You know, because the boy was always scared of tractors. And as sure enough, the father's name was something, and the boy did use at least the first name of the father. And they took him to a house, and he recognized, and he said, this is my mother, this is him, this is my father. He was able to recognize all the siblings by name before he had even met them, right? And they put a picture in the newspaper with his old mother and a picture of his previous boy, and yeah, he was killed in a violent accident. There's stories, other stories, and they say when you die suddenly in a sudden accident, then because it's so quick, some of the memory may come through. There was one case in India when there was a little boy born, and he said, actually, I'm a woman, my husband killed me. Yeah, my husband pushed me out of a train, and then his parents just ignored it first, but the child kept insisting, until eventually the police heard about the case. There was actually a case of a husband who had killed his wife, and the child gave information to the police that enabled the police to go reopen the case and find out his husband killed his wife. So he was, I mean, it's not like they believed the child, but he gave some clues to the police that made the police go back and reopen the case and see they had ignored some material, and retrospectively, not retrospectively, wrong word, no. Then eventually they were able to take the husband, check it again, and found he had killed his wife. So there are lots of stories like that. And there, if you read the books by Ian Stevenson, he's passed away, but in 2007 I think he was a professor of the University of Virginia in the US, and he studied a lot of cases. Of course, when we hear these stories, we may think a child made up the story, right? Oftentimes. So unless, I remember once, I don't know whether this person in this room, I once drove back from a kibbutz during a course, and the person who drove me, I forget her name, I forget what she looked like, but she told me the story of her grandmother's sister who was reborn in the family, and she knew so much about the grandmother that no one else knew, and only later on they found out that this was true. And this girl used a nickname for the grandmother that only the sister of the grandmother had previously used. No one had told her that, but she started using that nickname right from the beginning.
Chaya?
Is it Chaya? Maybe Chaya, I don't know, I forget, but it really stuck. She had so many details about this. So this is for me more convincing, that when I hear these stories, and of course there could be stories, but I don't know, they share so many similarities that this for me is very helpful. Other things that I find helpful is to think of why, sometimes you have identical twins who can be so different. They have the same genetic material, but since they were born, they have very different characteristics. Okay, nowadays people say, yes, but there's still some different in some of the details of the genetic material. I don't know enough detail about that. But we're also born with certain tendencies. It's almost like certain abilities that our parents may not have, and very difficult to say where in the genetic material, and why are we born with that genetic material in the first place? Why are we born with this? I mean, there's 5 million, I think every time a semen moves towards a fertilized egg, I think 5 million. So 5 million possibilities. So one possibility is the one that's going to be you in the future, right? From a Buddhist point of view, it's the causes we accumulated in the past that make those come together. Anyway, so those are some of the reasons that I explained, and we don't have enough time to go through them, but to share with you some of the reasons, and maybe if you have the interest to read these stories, I find most convincing. And this homeless says the same. He said for him the case studies are most convincing. And in Tibetan society there's so many kind of stories, especially lamas, right? When you have these special lamas, that's another part. That's for me a sense that I think there must have been previous lives. When I take His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for example, the way His Holiness the Dalai Lama was raised, pedagogically, a disaster. He was 2 years old when he was recognized. People started bowing down towards him. He was separated from his mother. He was put at the age of 5 in this cold kind of box called the potala. Cold building, potala. Could not see his mom, could not see his dad, was surrounded by sweepers, illiterate men who were his companions to play with, very strict teachers. If you didn't, I think he was beaten or something with a it was like a very precious piece of wood. It was not the ordinary piece of wood because it was the Dalai Lama. I think they used a special kind of, but nonetheless, you know, I mean, excuse me, I mean, pedagogically, if I were raised like that, I need a psychologist. I would really need a psychologist. So if you look at some of the lamas, the way they are raised, I mean, I'd be like a terribly spoiled, arrogant, full of myself child with a lot of problems. Definitely. If I was just like an ordinary person, terrible. And look